Hello everyone, my name is Nishant Dhawan and I'm part of the Enhanced Technologies team. I cover FortiWeb Solution, which is our web application firewall or WAF. So when we talk to our customers about FortiWeb, a lot of them, they talk about authenticating users before they can access to an application. So this spotlight video is focused on a use case which involves FortiWeb and SAML. SAML is one of the ways to do the authentication, and here is the whole flow, how SAML would work. I mean, there are other solutions like Kerberos and LDAP, but this is totally focused on SAML. So before getting to the application, if you want to authenticate a user, so let's say, and there are two moving parts over here. One is SAML identity provider, which is basically you will have a database, maybe an LDAP or some kind of database where the credentials are stored. And there is another thing called service provider, which is usually an application. But since FortiWeb is a reverse proxy solution for the user, they only talk to FortiWeb. They don't know about the real web server because it's behind FortiWeb. So you can see the first step over here is the user will come, send a request to service provider, which is FortiWeb in our case. It will send the request to SAML identity provider, which is IDP, which will have a database. You can see over here, it will be given a login screen. They will enter the credentials, and then those credentials are verified in Active Directory or user database. And then if they log in successfully, they will send the verification status to the IDP, which will send the response, SAML response to the FortiWeb, which is service provider. And then we will give the access to the user. So this is the way SAML authentication works. It's pretty standard if you're using FortiAuthenticator or Okta, or I'm using a third-party SAML test ID in today's video, but the concept is exactly same. So let's move on to how we configure that. Now the SAML concept is clear. So this is the third-party IDP. It's free to use. You can use Okta or FortiAuthenticator. It's totally up to you. And I have a FortiWeb, which is running in Azure. This is the FortiWeb. And I have a web server, which is running in AWS. So one of the steps we take is, first of all, is to define the SAML server. So you can see there are different ways, but again, we'll be focusing on SAML today. So you can name that. I have named it SAML test ID. You can name it whatever you like. This is my domain. So you put this entity ID, the service path, the ACS, assertion consumer service, and the logout. And then what you do over here is you upload the metadata from the IDP. It's essentially an XML file. So you're uploading the XML file from the IDP, which you get it from here. So if I go here, I want to download the metadata from the IDP, and here's the link. If I click this, it will give me an IDP file, which I already have. So I'm not going to download it again. But essentially, I get that file, and then I upload that file over here. You can see it's the same IDP file. And then I hit OK and go back and generate service provider metadata. Again, in our case, it's not an application. The service provider is the FortiWeb. So I will click here, and then it will generate its own, which you have already seen, its own XML file, which we will upload to the IDP over here. So upload metadata, and then you can select the file and upload, which I've already done. So that's step number one. Basically, we are letting them know about each other so they can trust each other. So that's step number one. You define the remote server. Then you come over here under site publishing and you create a rule. So for me, this is my website. This is just, home page. And then I'm using SAML authentication. And I've selected the SAML server, which I defined in the last step. And I'm not delegating any authentication or pending any custom header or anything like that. So rest everything is default. I hit OK. And then the next step is to create a policy based on this rule. So I've created this policy and included this rule. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is you go to your web protection profile, because remember, everything which is related to security is defined over here. So this is my protection profile, and I've selected this SAML test site publishing policy under site publish. And make sure you include this web protection profile in your server policy, which I've done over here. So that's step number 4. So once you do that, and then let's check it out if everything is working. And one more thing, make sure you have both the HTTP and HTTPS. If you're doing HTTP, but make sure you have HTTPS service turned on. So if I go here, you see this is my website, and I just changed my host file to go to this VIP. So I'm managing it through 8443 port. But if I go to the same IP, you can see 51.143.18.39. I have put it in my host file. It's going to go to this website. So let's open up a incognito window. It's just a certificate error. And you can see it's redirecting me to the SAML test page. And here are the username and password. I'm just going to pick, let's say, Morty login. And it's just asking me to accept or reject. But you can see, it's going to SAML IDP page. It's not giving me direct access to my application. So once I accept it, you can see it's the default page. So you need to authenticate first before you can get the access to the application. So that's the use case. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for your time.